During a recent visit to Venice, I passed a gondola. Not a gondola used to transport admiring tourists, but rather a plain gondola which could have gone unnoticed. Its gondolier was a young man who was learning this age-old profession passed down from father to son in the same manner as during the Renaissance. As I watched and listened, I quickly realized that I was witnessing a perfect educational approach. It could be used to illustrate the majority of recommendations for the education of patients, to allow them to manage their often complex treatment day after day. A gondola is a somewhat curious craft, a 15-meter-long, narrow, flat-bottomed boat that is asymmetrical and slightly curved, resembling a floating banana. This curious shape has been developed to ensure that only a minimum amount of effort is required to propel the boat through the water. When laden with an 800-kilo load, the gondolier needs to provide the same amount of energy to move forward as he would require to carry a 15-kilo load on foot, but on one condition: that he acquires the complex knowledge of maneuvering. It takes years to thoroughly understand a gondola. That is to say, to steer in a manner which is almost but not quite technically perfect. Learning is the result of navigating through this obstacle course. The gondolier begins to learn his occupation like a child with traditional Venetian boats. Then he must start to learn to master the posture necessary to hold the oar in his hand and to achieve the proper motion of the wrist. These are the basic requirements for the gondolier. Then there is the position of the gondolier's entire body in the boat. This has to be perfectly well managed, thrusting his weight slightly forward or slightly backwards to steer the craft and counterbalancing the gondola by standing on one side or the other. Steering a gondola is an almost impossible task, and so mastering the course is a difficult undertaking. You have to realize that for the gondolier, steering a 15-meter-long boat whilst remaining in an off-center position means turning it with an accuracy of 1 or 2 centimeters in these narrow canals. Being able to do so provides an immense feeling of satisfaction, but learning the gondolier's profession is extremely difficult, since in the early stages of training it is almost impossible to steer. The trainee does not have sufficient control. However, when he acquires it, that is, when the gondola and gondolier act in unison, with the gondolier's legs sensing the motion of the gondola, feeling that the man and the boat are one. This means that the gondolier understands that he controls his boat. This provides tremendous satisfaction.
Lento, tranquillo e guarda avanti.
Go ahead carefully.
Piano e guarda avanti.
Look ahead.
Attento alla testa.
Watch your head. Lower,
giù,
lower.
giù.
Still lower. That's it.
Ecco, adesso alza gli occhi.
Now lift
e
up your
guarda
head and look
avanti.
out into the distance.
Saper soprattutto mostrare praticamente.
It's not easy to know how to show what has to be done in practice, that is, noticing the expert movement of the oar, and how to perform those motions properly with the movement of the gondola. Also to make him aware of this using the young gondolier's own hands, piloting it at the beginning and then having him try out the gondola all by himself while giving him advice. The trainee practices and the master thinks. Rowing together is a method of learning this complex movement with the oar. Let's say, as long as the teacher stays behind his student, this position provides a certain sense of security. The young trainee knows that someone is always ready to intervene immediately at any time and to take over the boat. But later, when you stand in front of the young trainee, this means that you have confidence in him and that it is up to him to incorporate all of the movements he has learned. Apart from the gondolier's advice, I think that the most important thing is not to make sharp, sudden course corrections unless absolutely necessary. It takes several years to be able to steer a gondola properly. It is also because the gondolier finds himself in different and often dangerous situations. For example, there's always the possibility of a collision with another boat. Often this is not the gondolier's fault, since other gondoliers may not be able to properly steer their gondola. Such situations occur every day, and each time the corrective action taken is different. This implies that, as a result, the more training you receive, the more experience you get, the better you steer the gondola. But of course it takes time. Holding the oar properly is a basic skill. This involves positioning your hands correctly. And also, there is the control of the length of oar used, which can be reduced or increased. For example, in a narrow canal, you have to pull in the oar. Here are all of the little movements that one makes with the wrists when you wish to refine piloting the gondola. To do this takes much experience, because in the beginning, such sensitivity does not come spontaneously. For example, plunging the oar too deeply into the water and holding your legs too stiffly are common faults, even if you have long trained in peaceful canals where there is no traffic. Your legs become even stiffer when the sea is rough. In fact, you need skillful legs, the ability to counterbalance the boat, to take a wave and successfully pass through it, with one foot behind and the other foot in front, so as to form a triangle, to manage to keep the gondola's balance, using your weight. Such flexibility is basic. If you drop the oar into the water, you fall. Once again, your position is vital. When you find this flexible position, everything becomes easier. He knows how to steer the gondola pretty well in a difficult setting. But it's very important that he's already learning to have flexibility in his legs. I think that soon he'll become a good gondolier. We've been able to observe this fine example of the gondolier's intuitive educational method. This step-by-step, or rather hand-by-hand, progressive movement can be a decisive model for successful training in the treatment of patients. Training a patient is a little like becoming a gondolier who teaches and accompanies his young rower. It is like accompanying a patient who has to learn how to manage his treatment while passing through an obstacle course. There are diseases like diabetes that are as sensitive to control as this gondola. Learning requires experience and patient supervision. True success often is achieved on a route traveled by two people.